that connection of seeing you and hearing your voice, I think builds this level of trust that you just can't get anywhere else. I think like seeing somebody and really hearing them, you're like, that seems like a cool guy. I'd like to work with them.
There's over 1.9 million podcasts. Most of them never see the results they expected. They want to monetize, but their show ends up costing them money, and they never achieve the listenership they desire. This show will help you launch, grow, monetize, and inspire with your podcast. Get ready to take notes, because here's your host, Adam Adams.
And we're back with another episode of Podcast on Podcasting with Mr. Rob Roseman. Rob, what's going on? How are you?
I'm doing great, Adam. How are you?
I'm well, and I'm stoked to have you. And my favorite thing about you is how short and concise you had your bio. Sometimes some people will jump in and they'll have these outlandish, insane bios. And I'm like, place your short bio here. But what I get is like novel, and it's just paragraphs. And being dyslexic, I'm done with all of that. But yours is easy. Rob Roseman, retired Las Vegas poker player, poker pro, actually. See, my dyslexia still got me even with a short bio. Author of both Dad the Best I Can book and Dad the Best I Can, the podcast. And you yourself have 3 children as well. Is that right?
I do. 8-year-old boy, 6-year-old boy, 3-year-old girl. So I am still swimming in the thick of it. But how about you? Your kids are how old?
2 boys, 12 and 9. He's 13. He literally turned 13 3 days ago, and I already forgot. That's terrible.
Sounds like
I need to listen to your podcast more.
Oh, I forget.
So I can become a better dad.
No, I forget them every day. That is kind of what the podcast is about, is like keeping it real. We're all losing our minds many times during the day and don't feel bad about it. Other dads are going through it. So yeah,
love it.
The bio I keep short. Yeah,
I love that. Why did you start the podcast? What was kind of the catalyst that made you say, hey, it was in 2020, 2018 when you launched it. And what was the catalyst? What made you decide to start it? Were you the best dad ever and you were like, I just got to teach everybody how to be as awesome as me? Or were you the worst dad ever and you're like, if I can just learn from other people, it'll be fine? So where were you? Or somewhere in the middle?
You got it. It's a combination of the two. I had just moved from Las Vegas to Atlanta area where I was kind of reinventing myself as former poker pro, now entrepreneur / dad to 3 young kids. And I've always loved podcasts. I'm just obsessed with listening to them. And it's, we all say, oh, I'd love to start one day. And I was like, screw it. If there's ever a time to do it. I listened to Pat Flynn. He said, put 3 episodes in the can, get them out there, good or bad. And I was like, well, my life is about being a dad now. So why not talk to my friends about it or my neighbors? So I called up 2 of my best friends and I said, would you like to do this? We'll just have a conversation. They all jumped at it. And it just slowly built from there, whereas a lot of people said yes. My other thinking was I wanted to start network and plug myself into Atlanta in terms of like businesses. And I thought might be a cool way for some of these people that I follow. It turns out they're also dads. I wonder if I could talk to the CEO at Drift, David Cancel, somebody I'm obsessed with, his podcast, his LinkedIn. And what if I just said, hey, would you like to come on my podcast and talk about being a dad? Because I know you're a dad. And he's like, oh, that'd be awesome. So I was kind of like, holy crap, might have something here. So I kind of intersperse my friends, comedians I love, anybody that's a dad. I'm like, it would be neat to hear them talk about this other part of their life. So I was completely winging it. I thought it would be like a 5-episode run. And now I'm 115 plus in and completely addicted. And sometimes thinking, what did I get myself into?
That's cool. So we're going to jump in today with some do's, some don'ts, as well as some benefits of podcasting. What are the do's, what are the don'ts, and what are the benefits? I would like to spend a little bit of time, though, on your story, starting that podcast, which you've talked a little bit about already. And you talked about being 115 episodes in. And then just for the record, I did look up the podcast on Apple. And when I looked it up, I saw only 98 episodes, and you had a good explanation what happened there. So let the listener know, because I don't think he or she has ever even heard of this, what happened with you. And maybe they want to go that route. Maybe they don't. But let's talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I was kind of just putting out episodes every week, and one of my biggest early guests was a real hero of mine, this guy Jesse Itzler, who's married to Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, and he runs 100-mile races, he owns the Atlanta Hawks, he sold his business to Warren Buffett, but he had 4 kids that are under 10, and that was really what resonated with me. I was like, how is this guy doing it all? I did a cold outreach to him, which we'll talk about later. It's a little tricks to get good guests. But he somehow said yes, and it was an incredible episode. And we kind of built a little bit of a relationship through that. I just kept recording episodes. And then about a year and a half in, they reached out to me and said, we're starting our own radio network, a streaming kind of app, if you will, called BYLR Radio, for Build Your Life Resume. And we're taking applicants to have their podcast featured on our show. Like 600 people applied for it. They chose 10 of them, some business, some wellness, some parenting. And they said, would you like to come on our show, come on our radio station? The thing is, you'll be exclusive to our app. Are you cool with that? So there were some drawbacks. I'm like, I'll have to pull my episodes from Apple and people won't be able to get it as easily. The app is free, so it's like you can't access it, but you know how it is. Any added friction, you're gonna lose them. But I decided any chance to be able to work alongside Jesse and his team would be worth it. So I signed a 1-year deal with them, and there have been some drawbacks where I don't maybe get as much transparency about the numbers because we're streaming versus downloads. But once I look at the benefits of it and being able to associate with his brand and kind of draft off his awesomeness, it's definitely been an incredible journey for me this year. And while there are some drawbacks, now I have sponsors that I probably couldn't have got on my own. So a lot of pros and cons, and a lot of people will be like, where can I find this? So, it's not the traditional podcast right now, but I think, and as we'll talk about, podcasting has so many different benefits that don't necessarily just come from how many downloads did you get, that it's been a really great experience for me.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for going into it. That it is interesting to me. So the do's, the don'ts, and the benefits of podcasting. Let's see, you moved it over, you got your show. What are the big do's? What should we make sure if we have a podcast that we must do?
So I think that's something I learned is the hard way, and it's actually become more interesting since I moved over and I don't have the same schedule, if you will. But I think really setting a schedule, and that can be weekly, which I tell your listeners is a big, ambitious goal, because you can do that in the beginning and eventually you're going to run out of guests and content. So even if it's twice a month or even once a month, if that's what you want to do, but stick to a consistent schedule where on Thursday you're hitting publish on that show, good or bad. I don't care if the sound sucks, if the interview went crazy, but because you know how it is. Once you hit that publish button, it's a little scary before, but once you hit it, you get that exhilaration and you're really on to the next. So that's something that I think you see a lot of podcasters have, that drop off where after 7-20, they just hit the wall and they're like, nobody's even listening to this. What is the point of this? Which goes into the don'ts that we can talk about is, don't obsess over your analytics. I think that's something that's very seductive to do. We all want it to grow and get to 100 downloads, then 1,000, then 10,000, and hopefully that'll come. But if you're staring at numbers as your goal and you're going to let those bring you down or up, really goes back to my background as a professional poker player. It's like, if you think you're going to win every time, you're going to really be floored when 40% of the time I'm going home a loser. So you really need to not be so results oriented and really just be process oriented. Know that you're putting out a show. Know that maybe one person will listen to it and you'll connect with them. So I think it's hard to do, but it's something that I struggle with it too. But just reminding yourself to consistently put out content. And the great thing about podcasting too is these things last forever. So somebody could listen to it in 7 years and you might make a new friend, make a new business contact. So there's just so many benefits of it that getting obsessed over your analytics and that trend, I think detrimental to most podcasters.
So what else should we absolutely not do on our show?
So there's so many things. I mean, for me, I think a lot of people get caught up in perfection. I mean, I was recording on my phone, earbud. I didn't even get a microphone until about a year in. I think those things are important eventually, but I really just think getting content out there is very important. Kind of create a process where I'm not great at this. I still need to work on it. You're batching your content because, as you know, this is the fun part, the easy part, the recording. What's trickier is the marketing of it, the repurposing of your content, because I really look at a podcast as almost just an endless field that you can cultivate from. I'm sure you've listened to something where like one line just really stood out to you, and you might not really care about the hour interview, but there was one line that Adam said that really just resonated with me. So I'm always trying to find that, maybe cut that as a clip that I can post somewhere. Just generally think about your audience and not just about yourself as the podcast, which we do obsess over, but our attention spans are so fried that I'm always trying to give somebody like a little bit of value, get them kind of hooked and wanting to come back and familiar with me and the message I'm trying to put across.
So what about getting the wrong guests? I know we talked about that as another don't. Can you go into that? I know you help people get guests. You did really well at getting some really cool guests in the beginning with, I think, was Jesse Isler and other guests. So how about talk about like what happens if we have the wrong guests on our show?
Yeah, it's a lot of trial and error. And we all want the big guests. You know, you hear somebody and you say, oh, it'd be so cool to get them. So I think there's a couple things about that. When you're trying to get guests, you have to be patient, you have to be persistent, you have to be creative. So with Jesse, I'd heard him for a while. I signed up for his course, not even thinking, I didn't even have a podcast at the time, but where I'm connecting with them on social media. Eventually, I said, you know what, one of his tips is like handwritten notes. So I found a book that I was reading and I thought, oh, he'd love this book and his kids would love it. So I went to UPS store, overnighted a book with a little handwritten note, thinking this is a Hail Mary, and said, oh, I love what you do. If you'd ever want to talk about dad life, I'd love to have you. Thought it would be a 1,000,000 shot. And 24 hours later, he wrote back, I love this book. I love what you said. Let's book it. So I think you can go for those. I also think people can get distracted by going for these mega influencers or big time guests, because a lot of times, and I'm actually working for a podcast agency right now called Sweetfish Media, where we produce B2B podcasts. So a lot of these podcasts could be a company where they're trying to sell a product or gain exposure with another company or a different audience. So for them, getting a Gary Vaynerchuk would sound exciting and it'd be amazing. But what they found is a lot of times them getting the VP of marketing at Home Depot might be a better guest for them and their audience, because what they're trying to do is educate them about whatever their business is, or maybe even get them as a buyer. So I think not getting too bright, shiny object of I want the biggest guests, but if it's a dad podcast, my friend who I think is really interesting might be a more interesting guest than Barack Obama or something, who it's just like, really, I think experiment with stuff and think about who your audience is, what is your goal of the podcast, and try different things.
Okay, good. Makes sense. And I like how there's twice that you really mentioned that you really need to think of your guest as the podcast, not yourself as the podcast. The listener, the movement, what you're trying to accomplish, that's the whole podcast. And so it answers a lot of questions. It answers questions to the logo, podcast artwork you have. It answers questions of which questions to ask guests. It answers questions of which guests to have on your show, and so on and so forth. That sounds like a really important piece that I want to make sure that the listener extracts, because as a fellow podcaster, the listener is also going to want to make sure that they're thinking of the right things, not it's me, I'm the podcast. No, my guest is a podcast. It's the movement. It's what I'm trying to accomplish. It's not Rob Roseman. It's the Dad Podcast, right? Mm-hmm. So I love it.
100%. Good, yeah. I mean, along those lines, I'm sure we've all heard this. Nobody cares about you. They only care about themselves. You really have to, well, that sounds harsh. It's true. You have to, even in your outreach. So I do a lot of guest outreach. If I start my email, hey, I'm Rob, I've got a podcast called Dad the Best I Can. We interview this, you've lost somebody. You have 5 seconds to capture them. Whereas if I say, hey, Adam, I saw you out ATVing with your kids. I thought that was so cool. You seem like a great dad. All of a sudden, it's about you and not me, the podcast. I mean, they'll go as far as for your first outreach, maybe don't even put a link to your podcast. All these things that are little obstacles to getting your message across. So I think really just make it about the guests, make it about your audience, and just really try to, easier said than done, but try to put your ego and your stuff secondary.
I really appreciate that. I learned something out of that as well. So thank you. Okay, so the do's, one specific tangible thing was to make sure you have a consistent schedule. The don'ts, don't obsess over analytics. Don't have the wrong guests on there. And a couple of tangible things that you said about finding good guests is the handwritten notes and the flattery. I don't know if flattery is perfect to say this, but you do make it about the guest. Hey, I saw that you were out with your kids doing ATVing. That's awesome. Would you like to come on my show?
Yeah.
Share your story.
Keep it short. I think that's another thing we all do, and I'm guilty of it too. We write these long emails, and again, it doesn't matter who's writing it. Our attention span, it's never personal. It's just we're so distracted that like the shorter you can keep it, and it's a work in progress. Like, I saw you doing this. Are you up for being on the show? Or another trick I'll share with you that I've learned, and I think we actually connected through Clubhouse, another great audio app, but I'm a big fan of this guy, Chris Voss. He's a FBI negotiator, and now he kind of teaches people the art of negotiation. And one trick that he uses that I now use in every aspect of my life is change all of your yes questions. Hey, do you want to go on the show today? Hey, do you want to come to dinner tonight? And try to flip it into a no. And the thinking is that people are just we almost feel like trapped by the word yes, saying yes. What am I agreeing to? Whereas no feels like we're protecting ourselves. So an example would be big story that he shares is he met Jack Welch, the GE mega CEO, and his ask of him, he's like, I want to really try to get him as a speaker. But he said, Jack, would it be a ridiculous idea for you to come speak at my business thing? And it's like he froze for a minute. And the answer is, no, it wouldn't be a ridiculous idea. Adam, would it be a ridiculous idea for you to come on my podcast sometime and talk about being a dad? If I had asked you, would you like to be? You'd be like, oh, I got to check my schedule. I don't know. But like trying to flip your questions. And I'm doing this all the time. Would it be a problem? Or is this a crazy idea? Just like always being mindful of like, put yourself in the readers or the listeners' shoes and try to just make it easy for them to, warm them up and say, yeah, this could be something I'm into. So little like tricks like that as to your language, especially when you're cold emailing people, I think are really important.
You mentioned something. I wrote it down. You just said what's tricky is the marketing and the repurposing. Would you mind diving into that before we get to the benefits of having your own podcast?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people, they get finished with the podcast, they click end and they think they're done and that was amazing. And now they've got this 98 character gibberish Apple podcast link that they're like, hey, Adam, here's your podcast. That was great. And as a guest, you're kind of like, sweet, what do you want me to do with this? Like post this on my social, like here, you can't even post links. So I think what I've learned is the real work comes after is to finding, there were one or two things that you guys said that were really resonated. Can I cut that clip? Can I turn that into a video post or an audiogram or a blog post and give that to the person as like, here, would it be a crazy idea for you to share this with your audience? I made it for you. You don't have to do anything. So I don't think as podcasts, I think a podcast is a place to get great content. I don't really think of it as like this kind of singular thing. So when I have an interview, there's always three things that just stick out at me. I'm like, God, that was so cool when he talked about that. How can I take that, make him look good, share that with his audience, with my audience? And now all of a sudden I've built this kind of rapport. Whereas in the beginning, I was doing what most people are doing, hit record, be like, that was amazing. Here's this link. Let's go be famous together. We'll be Joe Rogan. And it just doesn't happen because it's too hard for the other person. So I think looking at your podcast as a place that you can find this great content is a better way to look at it than it's my podcast. Nobody cares about that.
I like how you say people think that they're done after pressing record, but the real work comes after. It's not just pushing record. There's a ton on the back end with your whole back office team, with creating audiograms, videograms, quote cards, thumbnails, publishing it, getting your guest to publish it, getting your guest to put it on social, you putting it on your blog, you putting it on your website. All of these things, and I'm only scratching the surface, obviously, marketing it, doing Facebook ads, repurposing the content, taking the original piece where you're going to actually do the post-production and have the intro, the outro, all the editing. You should probably cut out some ums and ahs. It's not just pushing record for most people. Unless you have a team to take care of it, like there's a lot. And it can be difficult if you're brand new at this. It's interesting to see like how many hats you're going to start having to wear. You're now a publisher, you're a marketer, you're still getting the guests for your show, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So people think that they're done when they press record, but the real work comes after. Interesting. Thank you. How about the benefits? I want to talk about some tangible and intangible benefits. First, start with a few tangible benefits that you see, like by being a podcast host.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all get into it with, I'm not saying I'm going to get rich from it, but it'd be so cool if I could get a sponsor paying a monthly thing. I think that's something we all think would be a nice thing. I think a lot of that is just a pipe dream, and it's something, again, you shouldn't target. You should target trying to create good content. But for me, I think it goes as tangible and intangible. I look at it as making connections with people, whether that's just as friends or that can turn into something. But, it's interesting because I made this connection with Jesse as a guest and then eventually got on his radio app. I now have a little bit more street cred to get sponsors. So I think those kind of things can happen. But I think really just looking at it as to what is your goal? Is it to get business specifically as a podcast brand, or is it for my business or to get customers? I think there's so many different things that you can get from creating it. And I think, so this company that I work with now, their whole thing is they call it content-based networking, which I think is a really cool way to look at it. You're creating content and you're networking at the same time. And there's just so much like win-win between it. So I think really just trying to, and that's not even necessarily doing an interview podcast, but really just trying to create good content and then leverage that to go places or meet people that you never could have without it. And I think a podcast specifically versus maybe sitting down to write a blog or something, I think that's way more daunting and challenging. We can hit record, talk for 40 minutes, and now we have maybe a blog post, maybe an email, maybe social media. So I think it's like, there's nothing I've ever found that has this exponential power of creating all of these different pieces of content and opportunities to connect than a podcast.
I took a few notes on some of the benefits that you can get by having a podcast. One of them is you can have the podcast pay for itself. You can have sponsors. You mentioned that you're in a network of other podcasters through Jesse that allows you to have really close access to sponsorship. And so sponsorship is a benefit. The next one is just making connection. You mentioned really connecting with people that are on your show or some of your listeners as well. I've seen that as well on myself. You talked about getting business or customers through the podcast. So I would also say maybe affiliate marketing, maybe selling your own products, your own services, selling your own consulting or coaching as well. But yeah, you can get business and customers by having a podcast. I really enjoyed, you said content and marketing, where it's this really cool platform where you're magnetizing or attracting your perfect avatar, your ideal client, but simultaneously networking with other people. That's the first time I've ever heard anyone say that. So I really liked it. And then you kind of mentioned that podcasts are easier than blogs. And I would argue that maybe for some people that just love writing, maybe the blog's a little bit easier than the podcast because they're like, I don't want to get my voice on. But for most people, especially listening to this show, podcasting probably is going to be much easier than other forms of content. On a different podcast episode that I've done, I had somebody on that was talking about how they moved away from hosting meetup groups because now they can be in front of hundreds of people at a time or thousands of people at a time, but the meetup, they could only have like 6 people
Mm-hmm.
at the meetup at one time, or 20 people or 30 people, you name a number. But on the podcast, it can become fairly infinite, since you don't have to fit them all in a room. You don't have to pay. I hosted a conference and I paid over $100,000. And now I'm friends with the owner of that hotel,
Mm-hmm.
and they let me stay for free at their other hotels in Steamboat, Colorado, when I go on vacation or whatever. But so there is intangible benefits of my podcast through hosting this event. But the event cost $100,000 to get only 600 people in front of me. But my podcast, every single day, I'm in front of thousands of people. On a daily basis, we're having several thousand downloads. And that's one of the biggest conferences I could have ever fit. That would have cost me many $100,000. And it's on a daily basis. So the power, impact that you can get by having a podcast is pretty incredible. And I will say one other thing, unless you have thoughts on it. What do you compare YouTube versus podcast? Because that's another place. There's in-person meetings, which I mentioned. There's the blogs that you mentioned. What about YouTube? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, one quick thing I will add to it. The other great thing about podcasts is that it's evergreen. It's forever. I could just stumble upon your show in 7 years. It's going to be there. And I can say, whereas at a conference or even a clubhouse, which I love, they're kind of ephemeral and fleeting. So I think that's another good thing is like you're creating something. If I'm talking to you about being a dad, in 20 years, your kids could listen to that and say, oh, wow, that's what my dad sounded like when he was 40 something years old. So YouTube is, it's Google, but it's the biggest platform there is. So I do think podcasts, another place you can repurpose your podcast. I don't think for me, they haven't fared as well if it's just audio. I think a video podcast can work. I don't think it is the best place to hook YouTube viewer where they're getting just this like constant simulation they might not want to sit through. But again, taking this interview, sticking it on YouTube, putting a nice little thumbnail on it, it's going to take a little work, but it's something else that will last forever. Somebody could look up, just Google Adam and real estate or podcast, and this might come up. And like that connection of seeing you and hearing your voice, I think builds this level of trust that you just can't get anywhere else. I think like seeing somebody and really hearing them, you're like, oh, that seems like a cool guy. I'd like to work with them. So it's easy to talk about, make a blog, make a podcast, make a YouTube, make social. That's easier said than done. And you probably will need help with it along the way. But it's something to, again, experiment with and put it out there. And again, you get 4 views and 1 thumbs up on it. You try not to beat yourself up over it and just say, you know what, this was a good content. I'm going to put it out there and maybe one person will listen to it and it'll help them.
Good stuff. I appreciate you with all of that. Now, here's what I want you to do. Share with the listener. So we did go through the do's, the don'ts, and the benefits. What I'd like you to do is just share a tip, trick, or strategy that will benefit a podcaster's journey if they're under 2 years with their show, under 100 episodes, under 2 years, under 100 episodes. What are 1 or 2 things that you can share with that listener? And then we will call to action them, our listener, with your podcast and how they can get a hold of you. So go ahead. Let's start there.
Yeah, I think first of all, much respect to anybody that has gotten past episode 3. I think like you hear everybody has a podcast, but I don't think that's really as true. You look at your friend group and they probably think you're a rock star that you've done it. So, give yourself a pat on the back that you've done that first step and shipped it. I do think, though, you will hit this kind of like moment at episode 20 or 30 where you're just out of gas. What is the point of this? Maybe reset. If you need to take a little break, I think that's fine, but just kind of plan out your content a little. Always have a few in the can. I'm not great at this always, but like it does get very stressful when you're like, it's Thursday, I've got nothing. What am I going to do? So try and maybe at the beginning of the month say, I'm going to record 3 interviews, or I'm going to do by myself 3 podcasts, or I might even go back and say, let's take a look at 5 of my favorite moments from a podcast and have that kind of ahead of you. Because when you do, like when you're against the wall with the deadline, I think it can get very stressful and you can just throw in the towel. So I'd say try to maybe set aside time every month to plan and batch some of that content. Again, I'm talking to myself here because I fail at it sometimes too. I've got this incredible interview that I did with one of my favorite stand-up comedians, and I'm just procrastinating on getting it out there. And it's because I don't just want to publish and say, hey, I did it. I want to make it exciting for him that he'll share it. So I'm right now cutting the clips and that kind of thing. So also just be willing to experiment with stuff, like, I hate to say it, but nobody's listening to a lot of your shows. You're not really embarrassing yourself or failing. So I think just try different stuff out and just keep shipping it, as they say. Just keep putting out content, and you learn so much more from doing it, even if it's horrible, than from sitting on it and saying, this intro isn't good enough or whatever. Just put it out there and go to the next one.
I love it. All right. I'm going to just share a few things that we heard today from you, Rob. Thank you for coming on the show. We talked a little bit about booking guests, a couple of strategies to be able to do that a little bit better, like flattery, reaching out to them and focusing on them more than you are yourself, or bragging about yourself, or that you have this awesome podcast, etc. So additionally, the handwritten notes seem to go a long way, where you bought that book and then you mailed it to the person with a handwritten note that was personal. And then within 24 hours, even it surprised you that he reached right out and he was like, I like it. I love the book and I'm in. We talked about some do's, like making sure that you have a consistent schedule, some don'ts. Don't obsess over the analytics in the beginning. Don't have the wrong guests on. Make sure you're serving your listener. Some benefits, tangible and intangible, some things that are different about podcasting, YouTubing, blogging, and even in-person meetings. Just the power that you can get with podcasting, connecting with others, adding content, pulling in your exact avatar, making connections with others, getting more business, getting more customers. And you ended off letting us know that it's important to feel comfortable to try things, to experiment, and to keep putting out content. I want to share with the listener as far as something we talked about a little bit earlier, where I'm trying to find it. I'm looking through my notes and I made a lot of notes with you, which is awesome. You mentioned that the real work comes after the podcast, after you press record. A lot of people think that they're done. And I just wanted, if there is a listener right now that's starting a podcast or felt like that was all you had to do and you want that to be all you had to do, my company, it's called Grow Your Show. Grow Your Show. What we handle is all the hard stuff, all the back end. So all of the marketing, all of the emails to your guest, all of the publishing, posting it everywhere, doing all the editing, the titling, making sure you have a captivating title and all of that, it's completely done. So like you just push record. So that is our route for some listeners who have the budget to just say, look, I don't want to do any of this stuff. I just want to hire it off. So that is possible. And then Rob, you as well talked a little bit about getting guests. You mentioned that you had a company. We work with a couple of companies for podcast booking as well. I'm trying to remember the name of your company. Will you say it again?
Yeah, so I'm with Sweet Fish Media, and they work specifically with business-to-business brands. Okay. So it's a really neat, exploding company right now. And so it is something to think about. If you're working for a company and you don't have a podcast, you might say, hey, this could be a great idea for us. And I think what you're doing is, it's such a valuable resource. Not everybody has the budget for it, but I think if there's no time like the present to just start and try it, and you will never regret having tried it, and you'll always have this content out there. So I think it's so neat. And I love the recap. You remind me of Howard Stern at the end of the show. He says, here's what we learned. I'm like, God, I got to start doing that. So I always forget to do it.
I have to do it. I have to make sure that I can sum it up, even for me to get some closure. I'm hoping maybe the listener needs the same closure I need.
Can't. But I was like, I said all that? That's great. Like, keep telling me what we talked about. That's awesome.
Right. As far as booking guests, a lot of listeners tend to struggle with it. So I hope that they could either find one of those websites that helps, find one of those services that helps, including your company. So how do they find your podcast, and how do they get a hold of you? Those are the two last questions.
Oh, I appreciate it. And I will give one other benefit of the podcast. Yeah. So I took my podcast and I repurposed it. I had all these great interviews and I turned it into a book. So that's something else you can do, where I now have a physical first sale book on Amazon called Dad the Best I Can, where it's got 50 tips. No way I'd ever in my life be able to sit down and write a book. But again, you have all this content. You put it in a Google Doc, you find somebody on Fiverr to help you format it right. And now I'm like selling books. So it's like just another really cool thing that would never happen.
Yeah.
You can
love that.
So I'm on Instagram as my main social media platform. I'm at Dad the Best I Can. The book is on Amazon, just Amazon, click Dad the Best I Can. I'm sure like you were on that site way too much buying stuff, but all 5-star reviews. It's just been a really like, it's something like a legacy piece too, that I feel like I created this thing. So, and again, if you have a business that is looking to start maybe a podcast for your business, sweetfishmedia.com. They're excellent for really just doing all things for your business podcast. But yeah, I really appreciate it. And I learned a ton in this conversation too, Adam.
Awesome. We will link Sweetfish Media down in the show notes. So it's done for you. If you're listening, just scroll down. Also at Dad the Best I Can, his Instagram, that's there too. And I even will put an affiliate link to your book, which is awesome. It doesn't charge them any extra, but I get to make 12 cents.
And nobody, and you know what to get Dad. Nobody ever knows what to get Dad for the holidays or Father's Day. I'm like,
Smart.
$15. Here's a book. You'll enjoy it in the bathroom. You can skim it. It's a good read. So I appreciate you having me on.
I appreciate you jumping on, adding all of that value. I could have wrapped it up even longer because there was so much value that you dropped. I appreciate it. I hope they go and find Dad the Best I Can on, I was going to say wherever they're listening to this. There is 98 episodes wherever they're listening to this.
Plenty of content.
The rest of them are at this other app. What's that app called?
That's called BYLR Radio. It's a free app. You can get it on your app store. It's Jesse Itzler's app.
BYLR. Type Radio. That in the app store.
It'll pop up.
Okay.
It's awesome.
Got it. Thank you, Rob. I'll let you go, but thanks for jumping on. All right.
Thanks, man.
If you're glad that you checked out the podcast today, if you got some value out of this episode, some actionable takeaways, I invite you to do one of 3 things. A, you could do a written review on Apple. Let us know what you think. Just an honest written review. B, you could share the podcast with a friend of yours who needs it. Or C, at the very least, implement what you've learned to take your business and your podcast to the next level. And I'll see you on the next episode.